Chapter 1. Truly the Lord had marked him for great things. Lucifer peered over his balcony, brooding about the recent developments in heaven. He looked at the angels walking about the city beneath him. Their forms shone different-colored auras, reflecting the holiness within, the mark of their Creator. His eyes fell directly below, and he saw his own image on the golden street. He studied the form staring back at him from the mirror-like pathway. It was little wonder that Lucifer's name came to mean light-bearer, the star of the morning, as he was without question one of the most glorious creatures in heaven. Lucifer's hair was his crown, pouring over the back of his white cloak in a golden cascade. His eyes were steely blue-gray and could be both hard and soft at the same time, a reflection of the keen intellect and self-assurance he possessed. Lucifer cut quite a majestic figure, and his majesty was never more apparent than when he was enrobed with his special garments for most holy occasions. He turned and walked along the balcony, nodding now and then to an occasional angel who caught his eye passing on the street below. Looking over the balcony once more, he continued to ponder his image. It was only fitting that the Lord's chief angel of worship, he who created and led the praises of the Most High, should reflect so beautiful an image. Lucifer could not help but compare himself to the other angels who milled about below him. Truly the Lord had marked him for great things. And yet... He turned his eyes toward the great mountain of the north, where the presence of the living God reigned in eternal brilliance. All the paths of heaven led to this glorious place, and one could not go anywhere in the kingdom without casting a shadow because of the radiance emanating forth. At times the light streamed down the mountain, cascading like a glowing river, spilling into the streets of the city itself, as the angels basked in the glory of a Creator whose presence was so pervading. Lucifer could only look for a moment, a glance really, before he shielded his eyes from the spectacle. He turned away. "My lord?" came a voice from inside the house. No response. "My lord?" repeated the voice. Lucifer turned to see his chief servant, Ceres. "Yes, Ceres? What is it?" he asked. "Michael is here to see you," replied Ceres, who was a little uncomfortable at the announcement. "Michael? Well now, that is something," said Lucifer as he made his way into the beautiful mansion. Michael had not come to call for some time. Lucifer glanced at his reflection in a small mirror. "It wouldn't do to keep the archangel waiting," he said, satisfied with his appearance. "I will receive him immediately." "Yes, my lord," said Ceres. Lucifer followed Ceres through his vast house, which was richly endowed with beautifully crafted ornaments of gold, jewels, and crystal. His taste for things of exquisite beauty was well known in the kingdom. Colorful tapestries adorning the walls hailed the Lord in various motifs as glorious, victorious, righteous, holy, etc. Ornate mirrors of various shapes and sizes hung on the walls, and the light from the north poured into the house, creating an ever-present illuminance. The odor of flowers hung heavily in the house, and beautiful flowers were also represented in various art forms. Ceres made sure to fill the many vases with pungent blooms, and the extensive gardens in the rear teemed with delicate blossoms. Lilacs were a particular passion with Lucifer. He entered the audience chamber where Michael stood waiting. "Brother Michael," Lucifer said as he glided into the room and grasped Michael's hands, "what a pleasant surprise!" They embraced each other. "Or is it Lord Michael now?" he smiled. "Just Michael, my dear brother," Michael said with good humor. "There is only one true Lord in heaven." "And a splendid arrangement at that," Lucifer agreed, looking at the powerful angel who had entered his house. The archangel Michael commanded respect from the entire host of heaven. While Lucifer was a creature of unmatched beauty, Michael was a warrior of virtue, with tremendous strength. Powerfully built, he had long brown hair like a mane over his broad shoulders. His handsome features were accented by his eyes, which were deep green and piercing. Michael was the chief warrior angel and the captain of the Lord's host. As such, he commanded a large and loyal contingent of angels dedicated to upholding the authority of God and carrying out his will. Lucifer looked at the jewel-encrusted sword that hung from a golden sheath around Michael's waist. The sword was the insignia of his rank as an archangel, an honor recently conferred upon him by the Lord with great ceremony. Lucifer had arranged the service, and this was the first occasion since that he and Michael had spoken. "You've come so very far, my friend," said Lucifer, indicating the sword. "It must be a great honor to have so much authority vested in you." "The Lord is gracious," agreed Michael. "His confidence in me is truly humbling. I only hope I can be half the servant that this represents." He patted the sword's handle at his side. "Come now, Michael," said Lucifer. "Of all the angels in heaven, who could possibly be better suited as archangel?" "Who? Maybe Ceres here," he said, pointing at the smaller angel. "That will be all for now, Ceres." Ceres nodded and excused himself from the room, bowing as he went. Michael watched the little steward quietly shut the heavy chamber door as he exited the room. "Well, actually that's why I am here," said Michael, a little disturbed with the way Lucifer had dismissed Ceres. His sense of mission overcame this distraction, and he went on. "In an official capacity, that is. I'm here to coordinate with you a ceremony for the installation of another archangel." "Really? Another archangel?" said Lucifer, trying to contain his curiosity. "And so soon after your own pronouncement? To whom go the honors this time?" "A friend to both of us. The Most High has decided that Gabriel shall stand in his presence with the full authority of archangel, and will retain his responsibilities as chief messenger to the kingdom. Isn't this a great honor for our brother?" "Quite," agreed Lucifer. He looked up and drummed his chin with his fingers, as if in deep thought about the service he must now orchestrate. "I shall have to make this a most memorable occasion for Gabriel. After all, how often does one become an archangel?" He paused. "Though it does seem rather commonplace with him these days, doesn't it?" Michael ignored Lucifer's casual use of him in reference to the Most High. "Let's go over the details," he said, quelling the uneasiness he felt brewing. "Of course," said Lucifer. He motioned to the other side of the room, where a beautifully engraved conference table with high-backed chairs was set up. It was here that Lucifer met with his council of worship for the Most High. Michael approached the chair that Lucifer pulled out for him. His sword noisily scraped the massive leg at the end of the table. "Sorry about that," Michael said, a little embarrassed. "I guess this will take some getting used to." "Yes," said Lucifer, looking at the sword. "It will take some getting used to." Michael was relieved when the meeting with Lucifer was finished. He didn't enjoy the fellowship with his brother angel as he once did. Something had changed in Lucifer's manner. But what was it? Michael pondered these things on his way to visit his friend Gabriel. As he walked, he mentally catalogued the person and position of Lucifer, trying to determine why he seemed so difficult of late. Lucifer enjoyed one of the most prominent and seemingly rewarding posts in heaven. He was chief lord over worship, a creative genius who could compose everything from a vastly sophisticated work with an angelic choir of thousands to simple praises of devotion that were utterly inspiring. Not only that, he was the most attractive creature alive, and not just in outward appearance, though that was staggering. No, he possessed an inner beauty, a sacred presence difficult to describe. God had so created Lucifer that holy praise manifested from his very being, and one could not spend a length of time with him and not feel compelled to worship the Almighty. It was legend among the angels that to be with Lucifer was intoxicating, even enchanting, as one drank in the very nearness of God. Michael certainly did not feel like worshiping as a result of today's meeting with Lucifer. Today he felt, was it tension? Resentment? Surely Lucifer, of all angels, was not jealous of the recent promotions of his old friends. His ministry allowed him access to the eternal throne, something reserved for only the 24 elders and a few select creatures. Lucifer's was a privileged position. As he neared Gabriel's house, Michael decided that he wouldn't make any hasty judgments about Lucifer until he consulted with his friend, but he was going to stay on top of the situation. Since becoming a ruling angel, Michael felt that it was his duty to represent the Most High in all circumstances. Whether leading in examples of holiness and reverence to the Lord, or encouraging other angels in their tasks, or being on the alert for attitudes that reflected indifference or resentment to the Most High, Michael was diligent in his duties. His closest friends thought that he was a bit too diligent in his protective role, and put it down to zeal of a new appointment that would eventually fade away. But what many angels regarded as misguided enthusiasm, Michael considered honorable and reasonable service. Michael was also, without a doubt, the Lord's most ardent and supportive angel. While all the angels held an allegiance to God, Michael was passionately loyal to him, and always had been, long before he was made an archangel. If other angels misunderstood his actions at times, that was all the more indication to Michael that they were not excelling for their king as they should be, and that his actions might serve as motivation. A commander by design, Michael longed for the times when the Lord would give him special services to perform, not so he could impress him with his ability, but serve him in humility. It was this passion for order in the kingdom that stirred up his concern for Lucifer all the more. Gabriel's house was now in view. Perhaps together they could figure out a way to help their friend. Lucifer walked around the room, dictating to Ceres the details for the ceremony. He spoke at a fever pitch, concocting and creating so rapidly that Ceres had trouble keeping up with him. Ceres had learned rather unpleasantly about interrupting his master while he was composing, and dared not ask him to slow down. Every so often Lucifer would pause and ask, "Are you getting that, Ceres?" and then continue on as before. When the moment arrived for the creation of the manuscript itself, Lucifer sat down at the end of the table and shut his eyes in deep meditation. After several moments of silence, the faint sound of many instruments and voices poured forth from Lucifer, spilling out of him. The music seemed to come from the area just over his head, but Ceres was never sure, and too afraid to ask. The sound grew louder and louder until it reached a crescendo of joyous worship to the Lord, a holy presence filling the room. When the music reached this dramatic moment, tiny crystals of light, like thousands of shimmering diamonds, appeared in front of Lucifer, dancing and swirling around like sparks from a roaring fire. Ceres watched as these beads of light pulsed with the music, creating a dazzling whirlpool that joined to form a glowing, pulsing sphere, which lit up the entire room. The light was so intense, and the music so deafening now, that Ceres could scarcely remain in the room. Louder, louder! Suddenly, all was quiet. Ceres waited a moment or two, quietly surveying the scene, and then unwrapped a large golden scroll that he had secured earlier. He placed the scroll on the table, directly beneath the sphere of light that was hovering in front of Lucifer. He then stepped back a few paces, as a single white beam shot out of the ball, or praise sphere, as Lucifer called it, and began writing on the scroll as one would write on a tablet. As the scroll became more and more marked upon with the strange musical notations, the ball of light grew smaller and smaller, until it disappeared completely. Lucifer remained seated for several moments, his eyes closed, his hands folded in front of him. An exhaustion always set in after one of these creative episodes, and it took a little while for him to recover his strength. Ceres, meanwhile, rolled the scroll up and placed it on a long, golden container, along with some other notes for the ceremony. It felt warm. Finally, Lucifer looked up and said, "Take that over to the council with my compliments. Tell them the details for the installation of Gabriel as archangel are complete, and tell them that, as usual, I am most honored to be of service to the Most High in any matter." "Right away, Excellency," replied Ceres. "And then come back immediately," said Lucifer. "I have another task for you." "As you command," said Sirius. Chronicles of the Host, before the beginning. In the vastness of eternity past, something which no creature can really grasp, but of which there is no doubt, nothing existed except the Father, the Son, and the Spirit in eternal harmony and perfection. Theirs was, and is, and always will be a glorious relationship of complete accord, anchored in perfect love and righteousness, each his own person, yet bound in a mysterious union which is one. The relationship of the three has always been a point of debate and speculation among the heavenly host, and angels of the greatest scholarship have looked into this perplexing issue, but of course no satisfactory explanation has ever been offered. The kingdom of heaven. So boundless is God's love, and so infinite his ability, that a decision was made to create a kingdom inhabited by a vast multitude with whom love could be shared forever, and by whom ministry would go forth to and from the Almighty. Thus was born in the heart and mind of the Most High a kingdom called heaven, where God's love would be eternally manifested to all he created, and through whom he would minister his grace and goodness to subsequent creations. How can a foolish angel possibly describe the wonders of the kingdom of heaven, except to say that it is all that one can imagine, as well as everything one cannot possibly imagine? Splendidly crafted for the complete enjoyment of its future citizens, heaven was, and is, a place of utter beauty, with streets of gold, seas of crystal, ever-blooming gardens nestled among gently sloping hills, babbling brooks crisscrossed with delicate footbridges, all underneath a canopy of the deepest, purest blue imaginable. The great city. At the very center of the kingdom was the city of God, sometimes called the City of the North, or the Holy City that was the seat of God's presence and authority. Within the city was the great temple of the Most High. A myriad of beings would frequent the city, pouring into the great temple to worship their Creator and serve Him. It was in the city, at the great academy of the host, that the angels learned about God and their service to Him and to one another. Perched atop a magnificent mountain, the most holy mountain, the city, with its magnificent spires, could be seen from anywhere in the kingdom. The city was surrounded on four sides by a massive wall made of dazzling precious stones with bejeweled gates at the center. Once inside, the golden streets were laid out in a series of converging squares, the center of which contained the great square framing the temple complex. The city was thus the crowning jewel in the kingdom out of which flowed the will, purpose, and grace of God. As he overlooked the finished work and found it to be good, the Lord was savoring the next phase of the creation, those who would actually inhabit heaven, and would serve the kingdom in various ways, as attendees and messengers, the angelic host. The Great Temple. The Holy Temple was designed to allow thousands and thousands of worshiping angels access to the Most High. The temple was the largest structure in heaven, with 3 gigantic columns on each of the 4 sides, each column crowned with a different precious stone, 12 in all. During times of worship, the complex was completely filled with worshipers singing praise after praise to their King and Creator. Many times the Lord's presence would spill out into the square and overwhelm it with billowing clouds of His glorious self, consuming all in precious smoke. A summary. Thus was heaven created a place of glory, beauty, and life. Much more could be written, and has been recorded in other chronicles, particularly the Chronicles of the Kingdom. One could fill many volumes on the subject, but as this volume chronicles events from the angelic view, I need not go any further. I refer you to these other excellent works in the great library. How wonderful it was to be born into the kingdom of the Most High God, in service to one so worthy, in eternal praise of His glorious works, witnesses to His creation. These were the bright times in heaven, the glory days of old, days of sweet fellowship and sweeter worship. How could any of us have known that a shameful darkness would one day prevail within our own ranks, and usher in an unrighteous kingdom with which we are contending even to this day. How might we have suspected that one day we would be fighting a war against our brother angels, which would call upon our utmost loyalty and would turn on the greatest sacrifice of love ever made? Gabriel lived just a short distance from Lucifer. The residences were situated on the same street, but what a difference! Whereas Lucifer indulged himself with great splendor, living in the largest house in heaven, apart from the heavenly temple, Gabriel chose to live quite modestly. Lucifer felt it unbecoming of so highly regarded an angel as Gabriel to live in such a plain manner, but it was very much like Gabriel to live this way, as he was one of the most unassuming and humble angels in all of heaven. Gabriel was everyone's friend and confidant. He was well loved and respected, quick of mind, playful almost to the point of rowdiness. But the most endearing quality about him was that one could entrust himself to Gabriel. This is not to say that the other angels were not trustworthy, but only that Gabriel's very person invited one's trust without reservation, a special gift from the Lord. It was to nobody's surprise, therefore, when the Lord announced that Gabriel was to become the messenger of the kingdom. For who better to serve as messenger than the one angel everyone called a friend, and in whom everyone trusted? "Michael, over here!" called a voice from the garden in front of the house. Michael turned to see Gabriel standing under a magnificent tree, motioning Michael over and eating a piece of fruit. "Hello, Gabriel," answered Michael. "Or is it Lord Gabriel now?" he added, borrowing from Lucifer's greeting to him earlier. "Lord Gabriel," said Gabriel, embracing Michael. "I've got to admit, it sounds strange putting those two words together, doesn't it?" "Yes, like Lord and Lucifer," Michael answered. "Now there is a disturbing combination, to say the least." Gabriel immediately drew the conclusion. "I suppose you've been to see our friend?" Michael nodded. "Here, let's sit down," Gabriel said, tossing Michael a large yellowish-green piece of fruit and motioning for them to settle themselves under the lush branches of the tree. As they sat down, their attention was suddenly drawn to a fast-moving figure walking in front of the house. It was Ceres, carrying the newly created music for Gabriel's service. He saw the two angels seated under the tree, gave a quick nod of acknowledgment to them, and went on his way. They watched him disappear down the street. "That poor angel," said Michael, remembering Ceres' curt dismissal by Lucifer earlier. He shook his head. "Who, Ceres?" remarked Gabriel. "I should be so poor, living in the finest place in heaven." He looked for a reaction from Michael and went on. "I know a few angels who would like to have his position. I mean, serving Lucifer is quite an honor." Michael remained impassive. Gabriel casually bit into the fruit and continued. "Of course, I suppose there is a price to pay for serving someone as temperamental as—" "Temperamental?" Michael finally exploded to Gabriel's amusement. "Lucifer is more than temperamental. What I saw today was simply unreasonable." Gabriel's interest was awakened as Michael recounted the events of the meeting with Lucifer, the mocking of Ceres as a potential archangel, followed by his curt dismissal, the uneasy atmosphere when they were discussing Gabriel's promotion, and the uncomfortable feeling that accompanied him as he left the house. Gabriel listened intently to Michael's story. Then an amused look came over his face, as if he were imagining a scene far away in his mind. "Wouldn't it be something if Ceres ever was made an archangel?" he said. "I would not want to be around Lucifer on that day." "Is that all you can say?" said an exasperated Michael. "You've missed the whole point." He stood up, facing the mountain in the north, squinting at its brilliance. "All right, Michael," said Gabriel, looking at his old friend. "What exactly are you trying to tell me? That Lucifer is bizarre and difficult to be around sometimes?" Michael turned around to look at Gabriel. "Everyone in heaven knows that. If Ceres ever wants to leave Lucifer's service, he can do so any time. He doesn't have to stay. He chooses to stay." Michael's face softened. "I don't know, my brother," he said, "except that he is so unlike the way he once was. We were all such good friends. Now I hardly ever see him, unless it is in official service to the Most High. He looked at Gabriel, his eyes teary, and went on. I miss the old Lucifer, our friend Lucifer, the Lucifer who roamed the kingdom with us from one end to the other, the Lucifer who laughed harder than any of us, the Lucifer who brought us joy and set our hearts dancing, our brother, the morning star. Gabriel put his hand on Michael's shoulder. I miss him too, Michael. He looked into Michael's eyes, filled with compassion. Perhaps you're right. Maybe we can talk to him together and find out if something is wrong. As he finished saying this, Gabriel spotted Ceres on his way back to Lucifer's house. Once again, the little angel nodded a quick greeting and scurried off. But one thing is certain, said Gabriel as they both watched Ceres move down the street. There is definitely a price to pay for serving Lucifer. They both laughed and headed into Gabriel's house. Ceres continued down the street, having delivered Lucifer's program of music. He wondered about Michael and Gabriel as he walked in front of Gabriel's house and saw the two of them talking. As far as Ceres was concerned, all of heaven could think whatever they wanted about his serving in Lucifer's house. Naturally, being connected to such an immense personality had its challenging moments, but it certainly had its rewards. Ceres was convinced that most angels would love to be in his position. Some on occasion had even expressed as much. For all his quirks, which Ceres figured went with the territory of creative genius, Lucifer was the most energetic and capable angel in heaven. His star was rising, and Ceres intended to rise with it. Ceres turned down the street leading to the enormous house, nodding to some angels who were talking. He enjoyed a sense of satisfaction as he walked by them, feeling their gaze upon him as he passed. He alone really had Lucifer's ear, or so he felt, and secretly thought it wouldn't be long before Lucifer would be proclaimed an archangel himself. Then there truly would be no greater house to serve in all of heaven, apart from the Most High's, of course. Ceres! Ceres! The voice boomed from within the house. Yes, I'm coming, Ceres called back, scrambling to shut the massive door and trying to remember if there was anything else he was to have done while he was out. Come to the garden at once, came the voice. Right away, my lord, answered Ceres, relieved that all was well and that he had not forgotten anything after all. Lucifer's gardens in the rear of the house were a magnificent display of beautiful flowers, lush fruit trees, small idyllic ponds, and scenic paths, the best in heaven. The trails throughout the estate provided a favorite recreation for Lucifer, who enjoyed walking in the garden for his meditations. Filling the air was the ever-present odor of lilacs, the featured flower of the garden. Also filling the air was music. Wherever one went on the trails, the sounds of lovely praises to the Most High were heard. This was designed to allow Lucifer to rest, meditate, or stroll in a worshipful attitude. It was Lucifer's contention that one should surround oneself with that which he hopes to attain. In his case, he intended to create the most compelling worship experiences possible. Lately, however, Lucifer hadn't been outside as much. In fact, it surprised Ceres that Lucifer was in the garden now. "Did you deliver the manuscript?" asked Lucifer, who was gazing vacantly into one of the ponds. "Yes, my lord," answered Ceres. "They thought it would be spectacular, as always." "Excellent," Lucifer said. He looked up and plucked a large berry from one of the vines and tossed it in his mouth. "Now, regarding the other task. It concerns the Council of Worship. I want to see all of them here immediately after Gabriel's installation. I especially want Rugio and Pelicus here. Tell them this is of utmost priority. Kingdom business, you know." "I'll convey what you mean," Ceres answered.